Case review and hypothesis mapping is really where an investigation starts to take shape. Up to this point, you've received a complaint and maybe some initial documents. But now, you stop being just a receiver of information. You become the person actively building the structure of the investigation. This is where you start forming a clear mental picture of the case. Not a final conclusion, but a working map of what might have happened and what still needs to be proven. Start with what you already know. The first step is simple. Go through everything you currently have. What exactly was alleged? Is this about harassment, discrimination, policy violations, or something else? You need to be very clear on the core issue, because everything else flows from that. A useful tool here is the 5W1H framework: who, what, where, when, why, and how. It helps you take a messy complaint and turn it into a structured narrative that you can actually work with. Then you dig into background materials. That includes things like personnel files, prior disciplinary history, relevant policies, and any records that might already exist: emails, attendance logs, performance notes, whatever is relevant to the issue. Think of this as your pre-investigation before the investigation. You're not making decisions yet, you're just understanding the landscape. Then you move into hypotheses. This is where good investigators separate themselves from average ones. Instead of locking onto one explanation too early, you develop multiple working hypotheses, different possible explanations of what might have happened. Some of them might even contradict each other, and that's okay. In fact, that's the point. Because the biggest risk at this stage is tunnel vision, getting emotionally or intellectually attached to one theory and only seeing evidence that supports it. A strong investigator treats every hypothesis as temporary. You test them, you challenge them, and you update them as new information comes in. And sometimes, evidence will completely eliminate a hypothesis. If something clearly doesn't fit, like a verified alibi or a document that disproves an assumption, then that theory is removed from consideration. This is very similar to how scientific reasoning works. You're constantly testing what is more or less likely based on evidence, not preference. The role of experience and intuition: most experienced investigators will tell you they develop a kind of sense for cases over time, what you might call an investigative instinct or index of suspicion. For example, they may quickly recognize patterns in financial fraud or behavioral red flags in workplace conflict. But this is a double-edged sword. Experience helps you move faster, but it can also mislead you if you become too confident too early. Good investigators use intuition as a guide, not as a conclusion. They stay curious, and they stay willing to be wrong, turning analysis into a roadmap. Finally, all of this gets turned into a structured investigation plan. At this stage, you start asking, what do I still need to know to reach a fair conclusion? Where are the gaps in the evidence? That gap analysis becomes your roadmap. It also helps you plan the sequence of interviews and evidence collection. For example, you might choose to speak with peripheral witnesses first, and leave key individuals or respondents until later, once you've built a clearer picture. And importantly, you also think about the standard of proof you need to meet. In most workplace investigations, this is typically the balance of probabilities. But depending on the context, the level of scrutiny and documentation may need to be higher, especially if the outcome could lead to legal proceedings. So at the end of this phase, you're not making findings yet, but you are building the entire structure that will guide everything that follows.